Today's episode is sponsored by Bausch & Lomb, the makers of Blink NutriTears, a new supplement for dry eyes. Now available in the eye care aisle at national retailers and online.
As much as we've learned about ocular surface disease, there is still so much yet to be discovered. The good news is, this creates a world of opportunity for eye care providers.
The goal of this podcast is to better understand this chronic and complex condition and keep you up to date on the advances being made in its diagnosis and treatment. So let's get to the point. Welcome to another episode of the To The Point podcast. My name is Jackie Garlich, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jessilin Quint. Hello, girl. What up? How are you?
Hello, Jackie, and hello to all of our listeners. We're here for another fun episode. And I feel like we always have somebody good, but I feel like every week I just keep, getting more and more excited.
I know, same. We have an extra special guest today, and I'm going to tell you one very cool fun fact about this guest also. But we are so thrilled to have Sathi Maiti on our podcast. Let me tell you a little bit about Sathi. She's a graduate of the UC Berkeley School of Optometry, and she currently serves as the VP of Clinical Research at the Perryman Eye Institute in Seattle. And she's been the investigator for many sponsored and investigator-initiated clinical trials related to our favorite topic, ocular surface disease. And this woman is crafty. Perhaps you saw a photo of her on social media where she printed out her research poster that she presented at Academy onto fabric and made it into a dress that she wore at Academy. The commitment is incredible.
And the
Welcome,
creativity.
Sathi.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on.
I think you did that 2 years in a row, didn't you?
Well, I made the dress last year and I wore it to Academy. Then I've worn it to a couple other conferences because it's like those are the people that are going to be interested in seeing it. It's like the other nerds, like
I was so into
Arvo
it
and stuff.
I was like, oh my God, you're so crafty. You made this yourself. First of all, I was impressed that you made a dress. That is very impressive alone. And then you printed it on the fabric. Very impressive. Aside from all of your other accolades, you're a seamstress as well.
Yes, it's fun. It's fun to have hobbies outside of optometry and to kind of make them work with optometry too.
I know. Yeah.
And you always have the best eyewear, like the best glasses. They're so chic, so creative. I feel like they're definitely an extension of your personality. And I always just admire them. You always look so fantastic.
Well, thank you.
I'm so excited to be talking to you today about something you're very familiar with. I mean, we're talking about research and how to do research in a practice. And you're familiar with this because you did this even as a student. You were like a research associate when you were a student too. Did you always know that you were going to go into research, or how does this show up for you in your clinical life?
Yeah, I definitely, I have always been kind of a scientific minded person. And I'd even thought before optometry school, maybe I would get a PhD, but, decided on optometry instead. But that had always kind of been in the back of my mind. But definitely once I graduated from optometry school, I was like, I can't do more school. I'm not going to do a PhD right now. And so I just kind of jumped into practice, and I practiced, primary care optometry probably about 5-6 years. I had a sublease when I was starting to kind of think I'm getting a little bit bored with what I'm doing, want to do a little bit more. And I got really lucky that Laura Perryman, who is a dry eye specialist in Seattle, relatively well known, she was looking to open her own practice kind of right around that time and was looking to bring on a clinical research side to the practice, so both clinical and research. And she literally posted a job ad looking for kind of like a research-minded OD that was interested in dry eye, and it was just very serendipitous that we found each other. But yeah, so I had been interested in research. I had done some research when I was in optometry school and undergrad, and so that kind of made sense as a career trajectory for me. I know not all ODs are interested in it, but there's certainly a lot more opportunities now if you're into into clinical trial work, into clinical research. I think a lot of the companies now are realizing that ODs, we have the skills and knowledge to be PIs on these trials. Like historically, they were really looking at just ophthalmologists, but there's a lot more opportunity out there for doctors that are interested in getting into it.
How does one kind of get into it? Like, where do you start? Like, you have a little bit of a research, but let's say somebody out there like doesn't have any research, or maybe had some in school, but really hasn't done that much recently, but maybe isn't in kind of a research institution. Where do you start?
And like start us from the base. Like I need the basics. Like what sort of space do you need to do research? Like do you need a research like associate person? Like give us the total rundown. Like how does this work?
Yeah, I'd say getting started is definitely the hardest part because there isn't really like a book that'll like teach you how to do it. I would say one really great resource if you are looking to get started and you know nothing, if you are a fellow in the Academy has this great program. It's called the Clinical Investigator Certification Program, the CIC program. And it will literally help you from start to finish, know what you need to bring into your clinic, if it even makes sense for you to do it. So that is a great way to start. Downside is you do have to be a fellow and you have to like participate in the program. But another way I'll sometimes recommend if you are, say, just like an associate somewhere and you're maybe looking to get into research, try to find out who in your area is maybe already doing clinical trials. A lot of particularly ophthalmology practices like retina practices, dry eye practices, they will already be involved in some of these trials, and they might be willing to bring you on as what's called a sub investigator, where you're the one kind of doing the assessments, and that can be a really great way to just get some experience. And a lot of the time, like, the retinal specialist is not even want to be doing these assessments, right? Like they want to be doing their injections and their surgery, so they will often be open to bringing you on. And once you kind of get a little bit of experience, then it's much easier to get like more trials. But yeah, in terms of what you need, you really don't need a lot. Like if you have a practice and you have an exam lane, you can pretty much do a clinical trial. What really takes is sort of having the right mindset and the right kind of staff support, because a lot of what clinical trial work is a lot of communications with the sponsor, with what's called the CRO, which is a clinical research organization. They will help facilitate like the day-to-day aspects of running a trial, like the documentation you need to do, facilitate getting the drops you need, any equipment, that kind of stuff. It's a lot of communication with multiple parties that you need to be very well organized. And typically you're going to have someone on your staff that plays the role of what's called a study coordinator or clinical research coordinator. And you really need like a good person you trust that can keep track of a lot of details, make sure you're like on a strict timeline. So if you already maybe have like a tech or your clinic manager that you think would be good in this role, oftentimes that's how it'll work. You'll have someone that's already on your staff sort of take on this role, but you're going to need some of that. And then even as the investigator, you're going to need to be pretty detail oriented. Like there's a lot of specific documentation required. It's not like when patients just come into clinic and you kind of do the assessments you want to do and document what you want to do. Like you got to document like everything. And there's different grading skills you need to pay attention to that will be different from trial to trial. And particularly if you're doing sort of multiple trials at a time, it's a lot of like, okay, this is what I need to do for this trial, and then jumping into this is what I need to do for this other trial. So I think most offices that do both seeing patients in clinic and clinical research will not necessarily like go back and forth through the day. Like you'll usually set aside a day that you're seeing clinical trial patients because it's too confusing to go from like regular clinic to research. So I find that a lot of people like try to do that and it's just too hectic and like you can't. And so what I do is I see clinical trial patients on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and that's all I do those days. It'll be other like prep work and stuff if we have downtime, and then we'll see patients in clinic other days of the week. Of course, sometimes you'll need to see an urgent care or something in between. But that'll be typically how it goes. Um, and a lot of it initially that you need otherwise is certain aspects to your facility. Like a lot of it's confidential. So you will need to have like locked file cabinets to keep documentation that only you and people in your office can access. You will need refrigerators and freezers to keep, the investigational drugs at a certain temperature, and like there's a lot of monitoring where if that goes out of temperature, then they have to like take the drug back. So it's a lot of like just little details to keep track of. And I think you either know that you're the type of person that can do that, or you're maybe not the type of person that can be that detail oriented.
For the person that you use for your research coordinator, do they need to have like a certification to be able to be the coordinator? I mean, this does seem like a lot of paying attention to these little details. And, if you're a provider and you're also you own your practice, for example, and you're also trying to run your practice and then see your patients and throw in I would imagine that you absolutely need a research coordinator. So is there some extra skills that they need to have, or can you choose anyone that has like a good foundational knowledge?
Yeah, there is no, so there are certain certifications anyone working on a clinical trial will need, like good clinical practice, whatever. There's these certain like tests you have to take, but there is no real like degree or license that they need. So usually I just say if there's someone on your staff that you just know is like super organized, good at communicating with a lot of people, keeping track of stuff, they can often do well in this role. There are some programs out there that will train people for this role. It's sometimes called like study coordinator or clinical research coordinator. So there are some programs out there. So if you do have staff where you're just like, I don't even know how to get started with this, like there are ways that you can facilitate getting them education on it. But you don't necessarily need to. Like we didn't do that for our staff. We just sort of, honestly, all of us just sort of learned how to work on trials as we went, which it can be kind of a steep learning curve. But again, like once you've done one or two trials, like then you kind of figure it out. And what is really good to know is everyone you're working with, the sponsor, so the company that is maybe sponsoring the trial, the CRO they'll be affiliated with, like everyone is trying to work together to get this running properly. So you're not alone. Like if you don't know how to do something, like they are there to help you. And so you don't feel like you're just going in blind. Like you have a lot of assistance. If you're just not sure about something, there's always someone you can contact that will help you. So there's a lot of ways you can do it and get help from other people along the way.
Do you feel like having the research side, kind of with the clinical side, like being able to offer both, do patients really like that? Like, is it a very positive impact? Does it ever get kind of confusing? How is that impacted kind of everyday clinic
Yeah.
life?
Patients love it. One, I think it shows that you as a doctor are at the forefront, the cutting edge of what is going on, particularly like we're a dry eye practice. And it's like, I know what drugs are in the pipeline because I'm talking to the companies. We sometimes know even before they're in clinical trial, right? Like what is coming out. And sometimes we can't even tell people, right? Because it's confidential. And so it's like, they know we're going to be able to get them stuff first before anyone else. And even just being able to provide them the opportunity to be a participant in a clinical trial is like that can sometimes get people access to a drug before it's FDA approved, before it's on the market. So, like we were really lucky we got to be investigators for the Saturn II trial for XDEMVY before it came out. And it was like, we have some really, severe Demodex patients that we were able to get access to XDEMVY right before it was even on the market. And so patients love it. The sort of downside is, of course, if they're participating in a clinical trial, they may or may not actually get the active drug. So you can't always promise like, yeah, you're gonna get the treatment. It's sort of like depending on the design of the trial, you might get it or you might not, but it does give you the opportunity to potentially offer them things that are not going to be available yet. And many of our patients, particularly, you both know if you're seeing really severe dry eye patients, many of them really want to contribute to the knowledge and the science. Like they want to help their fellow patients. They have gone through so much through their history and so many treatments and stuff that many of them like love to participate in these trials because they know like what it's like to have to deal with this condition and they really want to help. So we have found it's been great. A lot of people want to participate, and of course, not everyone will. But overall, I think it can be a really great thing to bring onto your practice, particularly if you want to really be on top of the new stuff that's coming out.
I was just going to say that about these severe dry eye patients. We all know these patients are really miserable. And so if you have this opportunity for them to be involved in a clinical trial, I would think many of them would be like, yes, I'll take anything else. What I'm doing isn't working, or I'm not, getting to where I need to be in terms of comfort. So I'm sure patients are really wanting to participate, and then oftentimes they're compensated, right, to be in part of the clinical trial. So this is like can be a win-win for them, assuming they get the actual drug and not the vehicle. But how do you go about finding these patients? I mean, at your clinic, there's certainly plenty of them that you could pull from your own pool of patients. But let's say that you're a newer clinic that wants to get patients. What do you have suggestions on how you even find people?
Yeah, so we actually include as part of our intake process a question that says, would you be okay to be contacted about clinical trials? So we know off the bat any new patient coming into our practice, whether or not they are interested or not. And then I think, of course, just being well networked with the other doctors in your area. And of course, if maybe you're not seeing a ton of dry eye patients, but you want to be working on dry eye trials, make sure you know the other doctors in your area that are seeing those patients. Let them know, like, yeah, I'm a site for all these trials. We try to actually on our website keep it updated with what trials we're actively recruiting for, so that then our colleagues can just go there and say like, oh yeah, I have this patient that I think might be a good candidate for this, and then they can just click a link that will send their info over to us and we can contact them. So definitely I think having your website updated, letting your colleagues know. Clinical trials are a little bit weird in that there's a lot of strict rules about how you can advertise for them. So you can't necessarily just like post on social media like, do you have Demodex? Like, come to us. It's like there's really strict rules. So a lot of it will just be like talking to your colleagues at like meetings and stuff and being like, hey, like right now we're doing a trial for persistent corneal epithelial defects, which are not super common. And so we're trying to reach out to like our retina colleagues that we're saying, hey, you might have done a procedure that led to a patient dealing with this. And we've actually got a lot of good subjects from like these other specialists. So knowing the different eye care providers in your area, or depending on the trial too, like we are potentially doing one for atopic dermatitis, and so it's like maybe talking to the derms in your area or like rheumatologists. So being well connected will always help you with that recruitment. And then just of course letting your colleagues know, if you're in your local association meetings and stuff, like say, don't forget, like we're here doing these clinical trials.
I do actually recall getting like a letter from like another office saying like, "Hey, we're doing it was for cross linking, but like, hey, if you have any patients, send them over. We're doing this trial." So yeah, it's a great idea to connect with your colleagues if you don't have a giant pool yourself to pull from. So
Has being involved in clinical trials like changed how you approach kind of patient care? Thinking about like evidence-based medicine and things that you recommend to your patients. Has it shifted, made it like more strong, made you think about it differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, we always want to be making our recommendations based on evidence. And I think understanding sort of how clinical trials work and the thought process design behind them can really help. And also, I think just being in a lot of the trials, it makes us feel more I think, ready to maybe prescribe things earlier on because we've already maybe had some experience with them, or we know colleagues that have, or things like when new drugs come out, like say Xdemvy or Mibo or something, it's like, well, I already know what those trials, what the results are. So I'm kind of ready to start prescribing them right off the bat. Versus I know I'll have some colleagues that are like, oh, maybe I'll wait and see like what other doctors sort of think about something before I bring it on. So I think it can sometimes help increase some of your confidence with recommending things maybe earlier than other colleagues will. And then just in terms of like answering patient questions too, it's like they might ask like, well, why is this QID dosing instead of BID, or and a lot of time if you sort of understand the design
Mm.
of the trial and stuff, it can help you more confidently answer them rather than just like, oh, I don't know, that's what the company said to do.
Yeah.
So I think it does just help you have a little bit more confidence in your recommendations and understand sort of why you're doing things, instead of just like because someone in a lecture said they did it one way.
So true. Has anything surprised you? I feel like doing clinical trials seems very glamorous, and it just sounds like it is cutting edge, and it's obviously a lot of work, and there's, so much kind of detailed stuff that happens behind the scenes that not everybody probably realizes or appreciates. But throughout your journey and your experience with clinical trials and different research, has anything like been a curveball, surprised you, something you didn't think happened along that way?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some things I did not expect. I mean, one, of course, is like not every clinical trial is successful. I have worked on trials that failed, and those drugs never became anything. And you don't really think about that. Like, well, yeah, that's part of why drugs are expensive because they have put a lot of money into some things that just never go anywhere. And then like different designs of trials too. We were on a trial where they actually switched midway through like who got active and who got placebo, and they didn't tell us. And so you're like going through during doing assessments and you're like, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Like they were getting better and then now they're not, like what's going on? You sort of like start to question yourself. And so a lot of it is just making sure, you are being honest with your assessments and you're not like trying to think to yourself like, oh, did they get active or did they get placebo? You really are just trying to be as unbiased as you can. And then of course it's not, it is fun in that it's really cool to be like on the top of new things, but it is also kind of like tedious. Like the documentation, honestly, it's like literally if you make a mistake, you have to like cross it out, write your initials, write the date. You're often like writing it on paper and then also putting it into electronic system. There's a lot of what's called a monitoring. So the companies will go through and like make sure that everything was done correctly. And they'll be like, oh, you didn't word this one thing the right way. We need you to like redo it. And you're like, really? But yeah, you just like have to do it the way they want. And it's of course an audited process. So Jessilin, like we are likely going to be audited by the FDA. That's something to expect, but that can be kind of nerve wracking. It's not something you necessarily have to think about when you're in a normal clinic. But of course, as long as you are following all the rules as you should be, it shouldn't be a problem. And again, the sponsors will really help you. So you're like, again, you're not on your own. Like everyone is working with you as a team. But there's sort of a lot of different things to keep track of. And oftentimes too, you're working on a trial and then the results are not going to come out for like a year, and the drug's not going to come out for like 2 or 3 years. So sometimes you're really excited about something, but you kind of just got to wait for it to actually manifest into anything.
Jesselyn, do you do trials in your office?
We're just starting. So I did with Sathi, actually the clinical investigator course. We've done a lot of not full-on clinical trials, but a lot of studies. So patients come in, we'll do an assessment. There's like a questionnaire that's kind of subjective, and they're done at like 1 month, 3 month, 6, like those kind of studies, but never like a full, or at least not yet, a full-blown like clinical trial. But they are a lot of work. And all those little details, having a study coordinator is huge throughout one of those, which is even kind of a smaller scale within our practice. Our study coordinator left in the middle. And so then you've committed to this project, right? And you're in the midst of all this, and then you're trying to recruit and hire. And so, like that's one thing that you don't necessarily think about when you're like, yeah, this is great, signing on. And usually they do come with compensation, which sounds really, again, glamorous. But when you think about like the amount of work, and obviously you're paying people, and, sometimes this is pulling you out of your clinic time. So like if you're a private practice owner or in a private practice, like there's a little bit of like, you kind of almost have to pick and choose where your priorities are there. And so it's just, all those things to think about. And then sometimes like, even if they recruit, getting people to like follow through and come back to all the scheduled appointments, and even if they're compensated, sometimes research participants don't always, you know, follow through. And so that can sometimes cause some headaches. But I will say, just like you, Sathi, is that patients love it. They like being involved. They feel like they're contributing back to the scientific community. And it does feel good to be contributing in that way. Do you do anything, Jackie?
No, but I actually signed up for this course and then I couldn't do like 75% of the times. It was like this evening time on a Tuesday or something. And I was like, maybe I'll do the next course. But I honestly go back and forth with this because I hear everybody talk about it and they say the same thing. Like, it's great. It's almost like owning a private practice, right? Like, it's so great, but also there's this side. And I feel like it's the same with research. I mean, it does seem like a lot of tedious work. And yeah, I've just not totally, I haven't done it yet. But I'm on the fence. Like I keep saying, I'm going to do that program. But yeah, I don't know. I've not, there's probably a reason I'm hesitating. Maybe I don't actually want to do it. It's not for everyone, I suppose.
I think that's the beauty of optometry, is that even though it's eyes, there's so many different facets, right? And throughout your journey, you can do research for a while, or maybe that comes later, or maybe it's not for you, you can switch to something else. Like there really is a way to kind of keep your career spicy. That's how I always describe it. Like keep you interested, try to avoid burnout. There's a way to kind of shift it and make it your own. Sathi and I are also doing the leadership training development coming up. So I feel like
That's
we're
amazing,
academy
you guys.
extracurricular classmates for two for this one. So
You
it'll
guys
be
are
really good.
amazing. Oh,
Well, we have to ask her about her life lens.
yes,
So we want
yes.
to know, what is something that you can't live without, something you've learned along the way? What's been really helpful? What would you say your life lens is?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that has been really helpful for me, and I don't know if this is even like a hack, is just like talking to other optometrists like this. It's like I sort of know you two kind of just in general, right? And I think that is really opened up so many opportunities. Like, even if you sort of are happy with where you are in practice and you don't necessarily think you want to do something like bring on clinical research or anything, just in knowing your colleagues around the country is just awesome. It opens up so many things that you might not even think you want to do. Like, I think I listened to an episode, Jackie, where Jake Lang like got you to lecture and you like didn't even want to. It's like that kind of thing. Is like we can help push each other. And so I think even if you're kind of an introvert, like go to the meetings and go to those networking things and just talk to people. Like we all are optometrists. We have something in common that drew us to this profession. And we have so much to learn from each other. So I would just say, even if you think you don't want to get out there and talk to people, do it. Like it will make your profession and just your life so much better.
That's a great hack. I don't consider myself to be like really like outgoing. Like I feel very nervous about like talking to new people that I haven't met. And I'm gonna just what I would do before a meeting is if I like saw someone that I really wanted to engage with, I would reach out to them on social media first as like my soft intro. Like, hey, like, I'm going to the meeting. Are you? Oh, hey, we should meet up. And then it felt less like I'm just walking up to somebody blind who maybe doesn't know me or remember me from 2020 glance. Like I'm just trying to, like get a new friend. So I would just
Yeah,
enter.
social media is great for that. Just sort of like getting to know people
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
little bit less pressure.
Yeah, totally. And you're right. I do. There is such a giant supportive community in optometry. And yeah, we were right. We can all really help each other. So good
Well,
point. Great life lens.
speaking of social media, where if they wanted to reach out and connect with you, especially before the upcoming meetings, how could they find you?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. I'm on Instagram. It's Dr. Mighty's eyeballs and stuff. If you just search like Mighty, Maiti, it should come up. And then you can certainly email me too. My email is sathi.maiti@gmail. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn and stuff. But yeah, I love to talk to people at meetings. So don't feel intimidated. Like, come find me if you see me. I'm happy to talk to anyone, like anytime.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's so great to learn from you about clinical trials and just kind of hang out with you. You're wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, this is such a great podcast that you two are doing. I love it.